The woman at the check-in table smiled without really looking at me. "Name Almira Kessler," I said. Smoothing the hem of my blouse, she typed something, frowned, then reached under the table. "Here it is." She handed me a badge clipped to a thin white ribbon. "Limited guest," bold capitalized with no name beneath it. "I think there's been a mistake," I said gently. "I was told this dinner was for me." "Oh." She looked behind me, waved the next person forward. "You'll want to speak with the planner." Inside the ballroom, golden lights shimmered over linen-draped tables. Dozens of guests mingled in satin and suits. I stood just past the doorway, scanning the room. No seat with my name, no plate, no welcome. Cameron stood near the microphone, perfect in pale silk. She caught sight of me and smiled like she'd just spotted a stranger. "Mom, you're here?" she said too loudly, too brightly. "Oh gosh, something went wrong with the check-in. They probably mislabeled your badge." She didn't fix it. She turned back to the mic, tapped it once, and began her speech. "Tonight is about celebrating the people who shaped me." Not a single glance back. I moved toward the side wall, standing near a cluster of folding chairs where extra coats were piled. A waiter walked past with hors d'oeuvres, skipped me. Another passed with champagne. Same thing. A teenage girl nearby leaned toward her friend and whispered, "Isn't that her mom? Why is she standing like that?" I looked down at the badge again. Limited guest. A title that meant not important, not invited, not part of the story. I pressed my fingers together to keep them from shaking. Then I reached into my purse. My phone sat at the bottom right where I left it. I opened one message thread. Darian's name. No draft. Just one word. Not yet. I closed the phone, slipped it back into my bag, and turned toward the photo slideshow beginning on the far wall. Cameron was 2 when her father left. No note. No warning. Just a drawer missing his things and silence in the hallway. I didn't have time to fall apart. Rent was due. Cameron needed lunch shoes medicine. So I took the morning shift at the alteration shop, the late shift at the motel laundry, and the weekends I filled with hemming dresses for neighbors. My hands stayed sore and cracked for years. We never had much, but I made sure Cameron had what counted lessons, clean uniforms, and a piano with one sticky key that she learned to ignore. I ironed her concert dresses at midnight, snuck sandwiches into her backpack, and sold my wedding ring to pay for her braces. By 52, I had paid off our little brick house. I didn't tell anyone how proud that made me, just painted the porch and bought myself a new iron. Cameron got into a private college with scholarships, and when they fell short, I dipped into the small emergency fund I'd kept in an envelope taped behind the kitchen cabinet. I never remarried. Never even tried. People asked, but my answer stayed the same. I've got enough to take care of. Cameron became a marketing director, married a man with perfect teeth, and now lives in a 4-bedroom home with granite countertops and a custom nursery. That house, I co-signed the down payment. "Just until the promotion goes through," she said. "Then we'll refinance." But they never did. When she called about the dinner, her voice was sugar. "We want to celebrate you, Mom. A real thank you for everything. It's long overdue." I believed her, now standing here, invisible beneath the shimmer and clink of wine glasses. I shifted slightly, and that movement gave me a glimpse of Cameron backstage. She was laughing with her husband. Then she leaned down and unzipped a silver envelope. Inside was a legal folder I recognized immediately. I moved slowly along the edge of the room, pretending to admire the flowers on the tables. Every table glimmered under small chandeliers, each seat set with china silverware and a name. All except mine. No card, no chair, just a space left open near the exit, as if I had wandered in by mistake. Across the room, Cameron's husband leaned toward a man in a tailored suit. She's not here for the meal, he said, with a short laugh. Just for the photo. They clinked glasses. Neither of them looked my way. I felt the muscles in my jaw tighten, but I kept moving each step slower than the last. The slideshow began on the far wall, the sound of soft piano filling the room. Photos of Cameron flashed by her graduation, their wedding, a new car in front of the house. Teachers, mentors, family friends, even her in-laws smiling at a barbecue. Not a single picture of me. Not one from the long nights at the sewing machine or the afternoons in hospital waiting rooms when she was sick. It was like someone had cut me out of her life with scissors. Cameron cleared her throat at the microphone. Tonight is about gratitude, she said, her voice carrying easily over the clatter of forks. She thanked her in-laws for their wisdom, her boss for his guidance, her friends for being her village. The applause was warm, sincere. I stood there holding my badge, the sound of clapping fading like a tide. Then I caught at a whisper from the wings. Cameron leaned down to a young planner, her hair falling like a curtain around her face. We couldn't tell her no outright, she murmured. She's touchy lately. The planner nodded, scribbling something on a clipboard. I closed my eyes for a moment, drawing in a slow breath. My silence had become their permission, and they were using it freely. When I opened them again, Cameron was stepping off the stage, smiling as if nothing had been said, and my gaze drifted to the silver folder now resting under her arm. 3 days before the dinner, Cameron stopped by my house unannounced. She arrived with a binder under her arm and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Mom," she said, sliding into the kitchen as if she still lived there. "I need you to sign a couple of routine papers. Nothing big, just refinancing the house so we can get a lower rate. It's still yours. We're just saving everyone money." I wiped my hands on a dish towel and looked at the forms. There were tabs, highlighted sections, and signatures already in place. My own name typed neatly on the lines where a signature should be. "You filled this out already?" I asked. "It's just easier that way," she said quickly. "Michael's already signed. All you need to do is add yours. The bank wants this in by Friday." Her voice was soft but insistent, the way she used to be when she wanted something new as a teenager. I felt the old reflex to agree rising in me, but something caught in my throat. "Let me think about it," I told her, sliding the binder back. "Mom, don't be dramatic," she said, her smile stiffening. "It's a simple signature. You can trust us." But I didn't. "Not anymore. I'll have my lawyer look it over," I said, and her eyes flickered with something colder than annoyance before she stood and left. That night, I pulled my own credit report for the first time in years. 2 new credit lines opened in my name, but at an address I didn't recognize. One was already maxed out. The other tied to a home improvement loan on Cameron's street. My heart pounded as I printed everything and slid it into my desk. The next morning, I called Darian. "Something's not right," I told him. He didn't sound surprised. By the time I set the phone down, the first outlines of a plan had begun to form. And when Cameron's invitation to dinner arrived the following day, my decision was already made. The note was folded small, like a secret, too heavy for a 16-year-old to carry. Marissa had slipped it into my hand while pretending to hug me goodbye after our weekly breakfast. Her voice had trembled just enough for me to notice. "Don't open it here," she whispered. I waited until I was back home in the quiet of my sewing room before unfolding it. I heard Mom say, "You're in the way. Please don't sign anything. I love you, M." I read it twice, then sat in my chair for a long while, staring at the same wall where Cameron's childhood photos still hung. I thought about all the years I'd sewn dresses for Marissa's school plays, braided her hair, before recitals baked the peanut butter cookies she loved so much she once cried over them. And now, she was the only one telling me the truth. I tucked the note into the back of my drawer beneath a worn piece of lace I'd never been able to part with. That same evening, I called Darian again. Start the transfers, I told him. Everything in my name only. And check if my power of attorney has been touched. Over the next few days, I moved quietly, closed old accounts, opened new ones, locked my trust fund, changed the passwords Cameron had once helped me set up just in case. I installed a small security camera in my home office. Nothing obvious, just enough to see if hands other than mine touched the safe. This wasn't about revenge. It was about not being the last to know anymore. The night before the party, I ironed my blouse and laid out the shoes Marissa once bought me with her babysitting money. Then I opened my phone and typed a message to Darian. If I text you during the event, it means go. I didn't send it yet. I wanted to believe I wouldn't need to, but standing now beneath the chandeliers of this cold room, I finally understood what that note truly meant. I slipped out through a side door into the hallway, where the noise from the ballroom dulled to a low hum. My fingers hovered only a moment before typing the single word Darian had been waiting for, go. Then I pressed send and tucked the phone back into my purse as if nothing had happened. For a few seconds, nothing changed. The music floated faintly through the door, laughter spilling between notes. I straightened my shoulders and walked back inside, weaving through tables toward the back where the coat racks stood. Cameron was still at the head table clinking glasses with her husband smiling for a photographer. They didn't even glance up. Then, the first vibration came. My phone buzzed once confirmation received. Darian always moved fast. Inside the room, Cameron's phone lit up on the table. She ignored it at first, then frowned when it buzzed again. Michael pulled his own phone from his pocket, scrolled and stiffened. A minute later, he whispered something in her ear, his smile faltering. I watched from the shadows as their little fortress began to crack. Cameron tried a credit card for the bar tab declined. She tried another same result. Michael opened a banking app, his face draining of color. The event planner approached discreet but firm, explaining that the payment method on file for the venue had been flagged. In the background, I saw a waiter place the dessert tray on the wrong table because no one at theirs was paying attention anymore. My phone buzzed again. House title secured. Power of attorney, revoked accounts flagged. Darian didn't waste time. Cameron's hands fluttered over her phone like a trapped bird, and Michael was now speaking in a low, harsh voice to someone on the line. I reached up and unclipped the badge from my blouse, slipping it into my purse as I stepped farther from the light of the chandeliers, and in that quiet corner, I could already see the silver folder under Cameron's arm beginning to feel heavier than she had planned. It didn't take long before the smiles began to fade. The event manager approached Cameron at the head table, quiet but firm. I couldn't hear the words, but I saw the shift, the way Cameron's eyes widened, her shoulders stiffened, and her hand automatically reached for her purse. She pulled out a black card and handed it over with a tight-lipped smile. The manager left, only to return moments later, shaking her head. Declined. Cameron tried another. Same result. Across the room, guests began to notice the tension. The music dimmed. The servers who had just started passing out coffee and dessert paused near the kitchen. The photographer tripod, already packed, approached Cameron with a clipboard in hand. I caught fragments of the conversation as I neared the exit. Until payment clears, I can't release the photos. But we already paid. Cameron's voice was tight now. I'm sorry, ma'am. The account bounced. Twice. I moved toward the bar where a small stack of printed name badges had been forgotten. Mine limited guest still sat on top. I picked it up, looked at it one last time, then placed it face up on the polished counter. Behind me, Cameron's voice cut through the unraveling. You don't understand what you've done. I stopped just beside the doorway. I didn't turn to face her fully. I just said it softly, but clear enough for the silence in the room to carry it. "No, Cameron." "I finally do." Then I walked out. Behind me, I heard a chair scrape sharply against the floor, a raised voice trying to smooth over confusion, but I didn't look back. Outside, the air was cooler. The night had settled. I reached my car and sat quietly for a moment before turning the key. By the time I pulled into my driveway, a new email from Darian waited in my inbox. Subject line, "Next steps." By morning, everything was in motion. Darian had already drafted the packages. One for the IRS, one for the local fraud division, another for the State Financial Crimes Bureau. Each included copies of forged documents, signature comparisons, account transfers, and loan applications filed using my Social Security number. Cameron hadn't just pushed boundaries. She'd crossed legal lines so bold even I could see them in hindsight. She'd used my identity to secure a second mortgage on her home, forging my name on disclosures. Darian's forensic team confirmed the signature was lifted from an old birthday card and pasted digitally onto several contracts. It wasn't even subtle. The most damning were the bank statements. 2 large transfers from joint accounts I hadn't accessed in years, relabeled as gifts. But they weren't gifts. They were withdrawals from my trust. And with the timing, the amounts, and the intent, Darian said plainly, "This may qualify as elder financial abuse." I sat at the kitchen table staring at the neat file folder he'd left for me. Marissa sat across from me, her school backpack still slung over one shoulder. She hadn't gone home after the dinner. "Can I stay here for a while?" she asked quietly. "I don't want to be there when it all hits." I nodded and slid a spare house key across the table. 2 days later, while Marissa was at school, a knock came at Cameron's door. A court officer served her both a formal fraud notice and a foreclosure warning her mortgage lender had already received notice of the forged loan. I didn't witness it. I didn't need to. The silence that followed was telling enough. No calls, no apologies. Just one email unsigned. "You didn't have to ruin everything," but I hadn't ruined anything. I had just stopped pretending my love would cover her crimes. That evening, I unlocked the safe in my sewing room and pulled out a thin envelope labeled "Last Revision." I pulled the old bin from the back of the closet, the one I hadn't opened in years. Inside were squares of fabric I couldn't throw away, not because they were valuable, but because they held pieces of the life I'd built. There was the faded corner of Cameron's baby blanket, the one I hand-stitched when she was still too small to sleep through the night. A strip from the dress she wore to her first piano recital, frayed now but still soft. Even the burgundy sash from her graduation gown was folded neatly at the bottom. I had saved them all, thinking one day I'd make something meaningful out of them. Not for her anymore. For me, I laid the squares out on the table, smoothing each one until a pattern began to form. Not perfect, not even, but real. Marissa appeared with 2 coffees and a quiet smile. She didn't ask questions. She just sat down and started sorting through the fabric, holding up colors against the light, like we were choosing gemstones. "Did I ever have a quilt?" she asked. "Not yet," I said. We worked in companionable silence. She matched colors while I threaded the needle. Somewhere between stitches, laughter found its way in light and unexpected. Not because we forgot the past, but because we were finally done letting it control us. Later that afternoon, I opened the safe and slid in one final document. My will rewritten in full, notarized, witnessed, and clean. Everything I owned now had a destination rooted in care, not obligation. The house would go to a trust under Marissa's name, locked until she turned 25. The rest, savings, the contents of the safe, and even the rights to the small cottage I'd inherited from my aunt, would follow a path untouched by guilt. No more revisions. No more second chances. I closed the safe, turned the lock, and pressed my hand against the cool metal. Outside the sewing room window, the afternoon sun softened against the curtains. Then I returned to the table where Marissa was pinning a square that once lined Cameron's nursery wall. Marissa's college applications came in a thick, hopeful stack. She spread them across the table like puzzle pieces, trying to decide where her future would begin. I made her tea and sat beside her, letting her talk through deadlines and majors and what it would mean to leave this house. "I might need a cosigner," she said. Not looking up, I nodded. "We'll do it the right way. With paperwork. With boundaries. With protection for both of us." She smiled at that. Not relief, respect. Later that week, I received a voicemail from Cameron. Her voice was tight, brittle at the edges. "You broke the family," she said. No apology, just blame, as if silence was betrayal, not survival. I listened to the message once, then deleted it. On Sunday, I baked the buttermilk biscuits Marissa liked and pulled out the good tablecloth. I invited the neighbors from both sides, my friend Ava from the quilt circle, and the retired teacher who walks his beagle past my porch each morning. We filled every seat. There was no assigned seating, but at the head of the table, I'd placed a chair with a sewn-in patch I'd finished the night before. One word hand-stitched in navy thread, Elmira. The dinner wasn't loud, but it was full of warmth of stories, of a kind of ease I hadn't felt in years. No one asked what happened. No one mentioned Cameron. They didn't need to. When dessert came, Marissa passed out bowls while laughing about a professor who wore 2 different shoes to her college tour. And I just watched for a moment, hands resting on the edge of the table, the hum of voices around me, like a song I finally remembered how to hum. I had been erased, repurposed, reshaped. But now here I belonged, not because someone allowed it, because I decided it.